Hello again, friends. Your fearless leader, Ed Harold, with you. Welcome to another great podcast and our Life with Breath expert series. Hello again, world. Today I'm joined by two breath experts to expand our awareness about the amazing power that we have to control our inner physiology, to amplify our inner perceptions, visualizations, and psychology. Before I introduce these two massive young men that have done so much with their short life, let's just begin with a moment or two just to get ourselves centered, relax, push away man-made time, and absorb all this information that we're going to receive from these gentlemen. So if we could just close our eyes for a moment, plant your feet firmly down into the earth as if you're going to stand up, and you'll notice your spine will become erect. Release and relax your eyes and jaw of any excessive tension. Drop your shoulders away from your ears and bring your attention to the base of your nostrils. And you'll begin to notice on the inhale, this amazing wind energy moving in through the brain and down into the body. And on the exhale, you'll feel this warm, humidified, exchanged air moving out across your upper lip. And just begin to allow the breath to slow down to the pace of a tortoise. And imagine there's powdered sugar on your upper lip and you don't want to disturb it. That's how smooth we want this inhale and exhale to facilitate the next few moments of our life. Slowing down that inhale and stabilizing the spine and the mind. Lengthening the exhale so that it's longer than the inhale without straining. Begin to train the brain that this is how I prefer to breathe, even when I'm not controlling my respiration. And for the last minute, if you wish, when the inhale is complete, retain the breath inward for a 4 count. When the exhale is complete, externally hold the breath out for a 2 count. If you want a little more, when you're holding the breath in, lift the abdominal diaphragm up to where it normally rests on the exhale. Lift the ribs away from the hips. And when you're holding the breath out, push the diaphragm down towards your navel where it normally rests organically after your inhale. And see if something starts to happen. Beautiful, everyone. Let your breath find its own way back. You can open your eyes when you feel ready. And we're going to learn a lot this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So we have a dynamic team with us this afternoon. First, I want to introduce David Bidler. And David's a speaker, author, and a leader in professional development. David is the CEO of Breathe to Perform, which shares the science of stress management and peak performance with industry leaders and their teams. David proudly serves as the president of a nonprofit organization, Physiology First, and presents material from the Breathe to Perform professional development series to students in the United States. David owns the Distance Project, a strength and conditioning in Freeport, Maine, and is an avid endurance athlete and ultra marathon competitor, and we love that. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you so much for the intro, Ed. And thank you for.
And we're also graced today with the amazing Dr. Jose Herrero. Born in Spain, Dr. Herrero studied physiology as an undergraduate. He then moved to the UK to obtain his doctorate in monkey electrophysiology, focusing on the processes related to attention and memory, as well as neuromodulation. In April 2012, Dr. Herrera moved to New York City to attend Columbia University, where he studied layered dependent attention effects. Awesome. In April 2015, he moved to the Feinstein Institute to work with epileptic patients implanted with intracranial electrodes on processes related to breathing control, meditation, and neurostimulation. Well done. Welcome, Jose.
Thank you so much. A pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm totally floored by your bios, you guys. You guys are young men. You're way ahead of the curve to where people your age, 25, 30 years ago, were looking into the brain, looking into physiology, looking into the body, and utilizing breath-based protocols to try to achieve more dynamic outcomes, whether they're in peak performance, a medical model, or in corporate or industry. So as we dive into this, David, what's been the biggest new thing that's occurring to you at Breathe to Perform?
Wow, that's a big question, Ed. So first off, thank you so much for having us on. We've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. Biggest new thing. You know, I think the biggest new thing is that we have this powerful tool. We have a powerful tool to control our nervous system, to control our state. And our job is to find a narrative to take that out of sort of the bubbles and the echo chambers, because we're seeing a year that has separated people more than ever. People are isolated. People could definitely use tools in the toolbox right now. And I think the biggest new thing is that if we can find the narratives to scale this message to people who have no idea of the power of their own breathing, we have the chance to scale a power tool at a critical time. So that's the biggest new thing, is working to find the narrative in the story that scales and gets this tool that people already have, gives them a little bit more access to it.
Yeah, I've been in this game for a long time, and it's still almost, in my mind, it's still almost like the first inning of the game. You know, we're still 99% of the people have no idea what we're talking about. It's amazing. And we've already reached exponentially so many more people with folks like yourself, James Nestor, Wim Hof, all these other quote celebrities out there who are using breath. But, you know, we're all part of this same message that we have a lot more control over our physiology and psychology when we have some breath tools in our suitcase than those who don't.
Well, Ed, one of the things I would touch on there is that, you know, to your point, awareness of our internal state is this 21st century power tool. Interoception, which Jose focuses on, I'm sure is going to talk about, is a 21st century power tool. But you would have to have experienced that to even know what the heck we're talking about. That's the rub, right? That's the challenge, is that people don't walk around and think, gosh, if only I had more internal state awareness. If only I could, you know, optimize my neurophysiology. People think I'm anxious. I feel stressed. I want to feel better. And so breathing is a skill that you can immediately feel the benefits of in a world of noise and a lot of information. And that, I think, is what makes it such a powerful tool. Because once you feel that ability to control your state, now you know what we're talking about. And you did that expertly with the beginning of the show. So I thought that was amazing.
Well, thank you. You know, and the people who I work with, you know, everybody wants drive-up enlightenment. You know, everybody wants it right away. And guess what? You can't achieve it faster without breath control. It's the number one shortcut without losing the quality of getting the information faster in man-made time. So it's really, you know, it really is almost one size fits all. Even though we're all different, we all look different, we have different perceptions and values. but it is such an amazing tool, and it's never let me down once.
Right.
And that says a lot in this day and age in 2021 with the COVID separation and all the insecurities and uncertainties around fear and what's going to happen to me. And, it's a place to go and just always explore this inner strength. Now I have this amazing Dr. Herrero with me, and I don't know where to go with you first because there's so much there. How can we start this hour, Dr. Herrera? Where would you like to begin with our audience?
Yeah, so I'd like to begin by highlighting the good luck that I have to meet David Bidler, because most of my work is in research. But since meeting David already back in 2018, and I could see how the research can be directly applied and to people. And looking at Dave's work, seeing how he reached out to youngsters, how in his gym you can see the combination between high performance and respiratory exercises. It made me think in different ways about how I plan my experiments with epileptic patients. And the interesting thing of my research is that I have the opportunity to take a look inside the brain, because I work at the neurosurgery department at the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research, and the neurosurgeon, who is my supervisor, implants electrodes in these epilepsy patients' brains to try to find the focus of epilepsy. And they lie in a bed for a week, and during that time I had the chance to teach them to do some breathing exercises, and Dave has been over a couple of times, to basically to make these breathing exercises even better. And that has been very exciting. And to see the patients happy, because they go to the hospital to remove a part of the part of the brain that is responsible for seizures. And they are very stressed, and you can imagine it's a very stressful time. But giving them the control of the breathing, that's one of the only things that can control in the hospital, their breathing. And it's been very exciting to not only measure the breathing and what the breathing does inside the brain, but also to see the behavioral effects in these patients. And so I think to take out in what you said, Ed, is about, looking into neural control of breathing versus breathing awareness by itself. And I think those are, both of them are very interesting tools, because, breath control can boost breath awareness, and the other way around. And in many cases, I have seen that breath awareness is not possible, and then breathing control comes about as a really excellent tool. And I think that was a start of Ed, if that was of any use.
How did you get drawn into the breath being the fulcrum for the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. In the beginning, I was very interested in attention, and when you study attention in neuroscience, you study attention to the outside world, what your brain does when you pay attention to a visual stimuli or to a auditory stimuli. Or, for example, in the cocktail party, when you are having different people talking at the same time, you focus on one person, and all the background noise.
Oh,
It seems my connection is not really great. I'm gonna move somewhere else.
All right.
oh,
It's all good.
Let's see if it's better here. Yeah, so it was how people pays attention to the outside world. And then, I look at there were some obvious changes in the brain. For example, if you are looking at you are focusing in somebody talking, you would find responses in the auditory cortex to be enhanced. But then I thought about how beautiful it would be to pay attention to the inside of your body and to look at what the brain is doing. And I start, because my background, I have experience with meditation. I start to look into the neural changes when patients are doing very basic, like breath counting exercises, or for example, like the deep, slow breathing exercises. So that's how I got interested. So basically, from switching attention from the outside world to switching attention to the inner body.
That's beautiful, because it really is a lost art form today. Focusing our attention with a relaxed awareness, it seems to be something that's a lost art to most folks. And it seems like we have a hard time balancing ourselves when there's the appearance of stress or negative stress on the brain, distracting us from what our original goal might be. Now, David, when we're talking about breathing, can you give us some insight about what's working for you in regard to the diaphragm muscle, that primary muscle of inhale and posture in the spine? Can you share some wisdom with us about what you're doing with the diaphragm muscle for folks?
To even begin that, I would say that what we work to do with Breathe to Perform is to really, really, really simplify things, and then to let people know that they can expand that conversation out. So when we work on our seminars, I think that if people can understand how breathing impacts the nervous system, I'm just going to send a quick note in the chat just so we can clear up. There we go. So when we think about the things that we want people to understand, it seems like there's this journey of learning that looks something like this for most people. Most people are told that they're chest breathing and that they're chest breathers, and that they should breathe with their belly. And their awareness goes towards different techniques to bring attention to diaphragmatic breathing. And they stop breathing into their chest completely. And you run into this issue where we've lost the ability to expand in critical areas. And you've gotten someone from almost one dysfunctional pattern to the next dysfunctional pattern. And if we look at stages of respiration, not just as inhales and exhales of oxygen and carbon dioxide, but looking at actual representations of the axial skeleton. Inhalation is a representation of the skeleton. Exhalation is a representation of the skeleton. And what we can do in the athletic world really easily is look at what stage someone's biased towards maybe being stuck in. And this informs everything about the breathing exercises that we might use, about the exercise programming that we might use. And the reason that we always start on the opposite side of that spectrum is that makes breathing sound really complicated. It's like, wait, my ribs are going to determine what exercise I use. This is getting something maybe that I would need more coaching or to work with a one-on-one trainer. And that's an amazing thing to be able to do. But to just get people to recognize that using breathing exercises to leverage your internal state is one thing, but clearing up underlying persistent breathing dysfunction is another. And when we get direct messages from people, from companies, from teams, from schools, the number one thing that we hear is, I've just been breathing through my nose since your seminar, and I feel awesome. And then somebody might say, the more introception somebody has, now they might say, well, I'm also changing my exercise selection and programming. I'm also doing things to build my carbon dioxide tolerance. But when we think about the powerful message that can scale, I think if one thing comes out of all this work, if people understand that their ability to simply close their mouth, breathe through their nose, and have that make a long-term change in their base level state, then from that simple platform, they can say, well, wait a minute, now how do I optimize this? And then you get into different breathing strategies for different archetypes of the ribs. You get into the relationship between the pelvic and thoracic diaphragm. You get into these more complex issues around the way that the skeleton is actually shaped by respiration. Mm-hmm. So what I always say to people is start by simply cleaning up basic dysfunction throughout the day, then tap into some of the benefits of increased interoception and self-awareness, get to know your body a little more through that. Mm-hmm. And then if you have the ability and you have the desire to go deeper, you can really dive into how breathing influences our entire skeletal architecture. And then you can dive into Jose's work in neurology. So it becomes a beautiful rabbit hole. And our goal is always to keep it real simple, foundational, and say, look, why don't we just close our mouths and eliminate a consistent ongoing dysfunction, and then explore from there different breathing strategies for the shape that we're in, because we kind of breathe ourselves into the shape that we're in, both mentally and physically.
Wow, that is just so well said. And you don't hear a lot of folks talking about breathing and the bones and structural alignment in the bones. Posture plays a
Every bone
huge
in our
role
body
in
is
neurochemistry, plays a huge role in patterns of movement, and just restructuring the relationship that the pelvic floor and the thoracic diaphragm have. It just brings the spine into such a position that muscles that normally would need to contribute to hold you erect can relax and turn on.
When you think about giving people something that they can feel, this is the difference between, if we're presenting to an entire company, organization, or a school, getting them to practice some simple breathing exercises because they're probably seated, maybe it's not a time that we can get everybody out on the floor. It gives them something that they can feel and understand. But when you get somebody in an actual training environment, and you can give them a breathing exercise and they can say, wow, I feel like a 400-pound safe has just been lifted off my sacrum. Mm-hmm. And that constant compression in my low back is suddenly gone. It's incredible. It's simple, it's powerful, and it may save them a lot of medical bills down the line. So it really is this powerful tool for both mental optimization and then just, again, thinking about expansion and compression. Most of us need a little more compression where we're expanded and vice versa.
And one thing we can say to folks is at the baseline area, you're not learning anything new. We're just asking you 100%. To remember how you were breathing as a young child before your ego developed. So you're not learning anything new at the baseline level. You're just remembering how you were breathing when you were born. It's already inside us.
One of the things that would benefit for us, Ed, is my partner, Lex, and I, we often give these seminars together. And when you look at the difference in her rib cage and my rib cage, it makes a really good visual presentation for how we're biased to breathe, what exercise selection may be best for us, how we can increase things like joint range of motion, get out of compression and pain. And to Jose's work, when you can give that to somebody in a hospital, when you can give that to someone in a school or a workplace, that's incredible, because that's going to change how they're sitting and how they're experiencing their day and how they're breathing. That's going to change their mental and physical state. But now you take somebody who's in a hospital, having the honor of working with Jose and his incredible work at the hospital. You have folks who are in a bed, and there are a few power tools that you're going to be able to own in that vulnerable position. And now you've given them a tool for both physical and mental agency.
Yeah, I think that, breath control protocols should be pre and post-op in the hospital immediately for all the patients, so that their care, whatever the surgery is not as debilitating. You're prepared for the work, and you can bounce back faster as soon as you open your eyes after the surgery. Jose, you're doing some research in regard to breathing in the brain. How's that going for you, buddy?
Yeah, so we found these ongoing oscillations in widespread areas of the brain, like cortical and subcortical, that seem to track the breathing. And this was already shown for animals. That was the case, but a few years ago we saw it in humans as well. And these oscillations so basically the brain is oscillating, up and down states, and then they can be synchronized with the breathing, particularly when you pay attention to the breathing in specific areas of the brain, like the anterior cingulate cortex, the anterior insula, the motor cortex, and so one interesting thing for me now and Dave is that the field of interoception. So, for example, they talk about adjustments in the hips and in the back to maximize breathing performance. And what is amazing to me is how many times we lost the proper positioning of our body to breathe properly, and then we are not aware of it until minutes after somebody maybe taps us in the back and makes us realize that we were already in crutch. And this is kind of what is very interesting to me, how these muscle and skeleton adjustments, they are not aware to us. until we are, told off. And basically how with training, with a respiratory muscle training, particularly maybe inspiratory muscle training, we can, be aware again of how is the proper breathing. And I think like Dave has maybe the bottom-up approach, by training the physiology and the respiratory exercises. And I'm studying the top-down approach, where basically we are having patients doing the respiratory muscle training while we stimulate the brain. And the idea is that the brain stimulation will enhance the effects of respiratory muscle training. This is a proposal that we have in the pipeline. It's still cooking, but this is the underlying idea. And I think it would be very powerful for many, many patients. For example, when you talk about COVID patients, where many of them, they reach out to the hospital already very late with advanced state of pneumonia. That happens because they lost the sensitivity to detect CO2 levels rising in the brain. So basically, they lost the interoception to detect CO2 levels rising, as a consequence of an infected airways. And by the time they reach the hospital, of course, they already are in full pneumonia. And the idea would be to enhance interoception of, skeletal muscles, CO2 levels arising for people that has, for example, blunted dyspnea, for example, reduce breathlessness awareness. And that's kind of like one topic that for me is very exciting at the moment.
It's beautiful. Can you speak a little bit about how breathing rates per minute affect neural activity? How many breaths we take per minute? How does that, in other words, less breaths per minute, how's the brain respond to that? Or more shallow breaths per minute? How does the brain respond to that type of breathing?
Yeah, so for example, if you start hyperventilating, you see like neural oscillations in the premotor and motor cortex, like rapidly following the respiration cycle, and they like if you try to modulate your respiration, this like for example, start to breathe slower, these oscillations start to go slower. You start to go fast, they go fast. And then you have also oscillations in areas like the olfactory bulb, that is the first input from the nostrum into the brain, and the orbitofrontal cortex areas that are also tracking the breathing very closely. For example, when you take a sniff. And the thing is, when you start to breathe very, very, very slow, then your neural oscillations start to adjust as well. So you kind of reduce neural excitability in this way. And for example, like mice, we know they breathe like three times per second. Like humans, we breathe like 1 time every 6 seconds. So I think this is in a way like Dave likes to talk about, the control remote to the brain is breathing, and I support that from a neural perspective.
So would it be safe for me to say that less breaths per minute in and out through the nose is a way to stall aging and senior diseases of the brain?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like researching brain excitability, and still there is a lot of research to be done for aging, and neural plasticity, but I don't know. I think these days anxiety is a tool that makes us age very fast without us realizing. And deep slow breathing, or going through your day with the less amount of breath that you can, it could be a good strategy to just reduce anxiety and in turn, have the cascade of beneficial effects.
Well, I think people don't understand how the brain responds to injury or trauma different than our soft tissue or our muscles if they become injured or we break a bone. And the brain is such an amazing organ. You know, to me, beginning, there is no other health, first and foremost, other than mental health and being a good steward to our mind, to our thoughts, to our awareness, and, you know, being aware of that naysayer in the brain and having tools on board where we can, you know, learn from that and then transform that negativity. But I think, you know, a lot of the folks I work with, whether it be in the fitness world or the corporate world, you know, it's all about what I look like in the mirror, you know, and that's great. But at the end of the day, let's take a look at how breathing interacts with the brain so that we can take care of this brain like the beautiful jewel that it is.
That's such a big part of our work right now with young people at Physiology First, at our nonprofit organization, and with companies. And I think that one of the things that I love so much about partnering with Jose is you have the neuroscience, and then you have the ability to tell a story about it. And when I say a story, I don't mean a mystical story. I mean a story about agency, goals, power in the 21st century, and power being the ability to act, power being the ability to navigate a really complex, fast-moving world. And we always open our seminars, especially for young people, with a narrative about the future and what it would look like to have a skill set for the barriers and the barricades and the roadblocks and the chaos that we're all about to head into in so many levels. And once we are able to tie breath awareness, breath control, breath training, and breath practice into something that they've said, I care about. We do a visualization exercise with the youngsters where they just lay down for a few minutes and visualize the version of their future that they're most excited to live into. Now, that may change 100 times, but the point is that they often haven't taken a moment to do that, to ask, where am I going? And then we'll share the following narrative with them. We'll say, you know, everything we're about to share about breathing is just a tool in the toolbox to help you get there, because most people don't get there. Getting there is hard. Reaching your goals is hard. And if it wasn't, everyone would be living the life that they want to. It's difficult. And you're going to run into so many challenges. And the one power tool that unites everyone that I know who's been able to walk that journey and reach their goals is their ability to manage their internal state in a chaotic external environment. They've got a tool, they've got a hammer, they have a skill. And that's the skill we want to share with you. And that changes the whole dynamic of the conversation. Now we're not just talking about how you should breathe. We're saying, hey, here's a power tool. Let me show you how to use it. And that gets so much more engagement out of these kids.
I think that's great that we bring this to the kids. You know, this is the next generation, and, you know, they've got a lot on their plate. There's a lot of less than perfect things going on outside of us, and they're really going to have to strive for perfection in the eye of adversity. There's going to be a lot of distractions, a lot of, you know, extra weight on these kids, and, you know, teaching them what you're teaching them is a gift that they're going to carry throughout their journey. So, you know, congratulations, because the kids pick this stuff up right away too, in my experience.
I can't tell you how true that is. And we're doing a lot of work right now to work to get breath education into schools. And I think that there is, of the many challenges, he referenced, the fact that we're facing a lot of challenges, right? I think that one of the most critical is the one that's the most subtle and the most subversive. And that is our relationship with technology, because it's complex. I'd like to see more research developing about how technology in general actually influences the brain and nervous system. And then you're going to get into the sort of psychosocial dynamics of how computer algorithms and very, very sophisticated advertising machines manipulate what we see on our screen. So when you look at the rates of youth mental health issues from 2009 to 2011, you see a hockey stick, this incredible jump, because they've gone from having most of their social experiences happen face-to-face to having most of them happen in this very, very cultivated advertising marketplace, which is the internet and social media. So as we think about the effect that has on their general nervous system state, you have the actual immersion into this sort of digital world, and then you have the psychological dynamics of having your social approval rating constantly flashing on a 4x6-inch screen through things like, the platforms that we all use. So it's such a critical time to give them these tools And to Jose's point, you can bring in the research and show them that this isn't mysticism. This will change your nervous system. This will change the supercomputer in your skull. And that supercomputer, the more that you learn about it, that's going to be one powerful skill to hone at 15, 16, 17, 18, heading into the Wild West right now.
Yeah, I can't imagine learning this stuff when, in my teenage years. That's the one regret I have, is that it didn't start till 35.
Same thing.
But that's that's my journey, and I love my journey. But it's just interesting, like people have to find ways that are different in regard to how we create the boundaries about how we're going to talk to ourselves, and then what we choose to put out in the public. And we have these computers, and we're looking at this computer when actually the computer is looking at us, and it's well deciding, to some degree, what we're going to watch and what we're going to see and what's going to stimulate our senses based on what it's seen us looking at over the last couple months.
Well, Ed, I was just going to mention that, one of the things to tie into that is right now, I believe it's 70%, or maybe it's a little higher than 70% of all YouTube views are based on the recommendation engine. 70%. Right. Imagine if the time that me and you grew up, that Jose grew up, that 70% of our next books were just kind of funneled by what we read last. You can easily fall into echo chambers, identity politics, or pretty interesting portals. So one of the things that we're doing at Physiology First is we built an online learning platform called Physiology First University. It's all free for kids. They can access the work that Jose is doing. They can access our breathing classes. And they can do it in an atmosphere where there is no data mining, there are no advertisements. It's a place that they can go. It's it's not a marketplace. It's something we actually built for them to get some of these life skills under their belt.
And what's interesting, when the computer is choosing for you based on your past, what was comfortable for you, it really only stimulates our subconscious. There's no neuroplasticity. There's no listening to a new song or a new rhythm or a new group. You're constantly replaying your past and setting in motion the physical brain to operate that way. And then every time there's an opportunity for something to learn, we're like, oh, I don't want to learn that, because I just want to stay in this little circle. And that's no way to live with a human awareness.
Really, really well said. And you don't see it because it's very, very subtle. I think it's very hard to reach young people through social media with information on neuroscience and all this stuff because the algorithms don't let it in. It isn't like the other things that they see, but yet there's this deep curiosity. And when we work with kids, we show them the work that Jose is doing. We take them through simple exercises. We'll have them go through a workout and then lower their heart rate afterwards with purpose and agency and control. And then ask, well, where else could that be cool? Like a job interview, an investor pitch, speaking being public, a big game. And they go, oh, wow. I changed my physiology. I did it. I lived it. And now I left with the skill. A lot of that has to happen in person.
I just love this. I love this. Jose, is there a breathing exercise that you're working with right now with your clients that you would care to share with our audience?
Sure. So, we do like breathing biofeedback exercises. So we present the breathing waveform in the screen, and we put thresholds, like an upper threshold and a lower threshold. And then we ask the people to breathe, not crossing those thresholds, and also making the transitions between inhalation and exhalation very smooth. I like it to call it like the Tai Chi of the breathing. And for people that, for example, has exaggerated dyspnea, for people with high anxiety and they cannot detect, for example, any changes in CO2 rising levels, very soon they want to inhale again, and they feel breathlessness a lot and very unpleasant sensations. Like imagine like if you are breathing 15 times per minute, and every time that you breathe, you feel like you are short of air. That's really, really debilitating. And for example, this breathing, like biofeedback exercise, allows the the patients to see that you don't have to take big inhalations and very sharp transients. You can just take very smooth and slow inhalations and transition to the exhalation. So that is a very nice, I think it's a nice exercise. Then also like I'm very fan of the box breathing exercises that they wrote a book about, and like changing the numbers, of seconds that you inhale versus pause versus exhale versus pause again, depending on whether you have you have very high sensitivity to these CO2 levels arising, or the opposite, whether you basically you are not feeling any changes in CO2, and like basically like COVID patients with the respiratory problems, or some cases of like lung disease, and I think for me, like, biofeedback is a very important tool, and it's very underexploited, basically because you need some gadget that shows you in real time your breathing performance. But I think that could be very useful. And also, like, what I really like about Dave's approach is like basically putting your hands in your ribs, and as you do different breathing exercises, you feel your ribs expanding laterally, like the yogi experts that breathe laterally. And basically a combination between the muscles, intercostal muscles, that send the feedback to your brain, and then the brain that sends the feedback to the muscles, and the interplay between those two is what is going to be more effective in my view. And in the cases where this is still not effective, we can still resort to like brain stimulation. Now, for example, there is these devices like vagus nerve stimulation that are not invasive. You can put it in your ear, and you can either stimulate your vagus nerve either in the inhalation or the exhalation, depending what you want to, which process you want to enhance. And these kind of things I'm much more fun about compared to taking drugs, that basically suppress the respiratory drive,
Mm-hmm.
and can cause like very serious effects if you have a very suppressed respiratory drive and you are not aware of your CO2 levels. So
That's great. That's congratulations. We have a lot of, there's a lot of science around breath and cognition. There's a lot of science around breath and the gut brain and emotional intelligence. But there isn't really a lot of science out there on breath and controlling our moods. And moods might be a combination of subconscious imprints of feeling with an accompanying narrative or cognition or story. Have you seen any research in regard to how breathing gives us the opportunity to control an uncomfortable mood from our past rather than that uncomfortable mood control us?
Is that a question for me or Dave?
It's for all of us.
It's such a good question, because I think, like you said in the beginning, and as Jose said, you don't walk in the same river twice, right? When we're working with somebody on a breathing exercise, all the things that you can't measure are their disposition towards the idea of a breathing exercise, what they're connecting it to in their mind, what narrative people think different things when they hear breathing exercises. One person thinks pranayama and yoga, somebody else thinks free diving, somebody else thinks peak mental performance, somebody else thinks that's woohoo and nonsense, because we aren't taught we aren't taught effectively, I don't believe, about our own nervous system. I think a thing that separates people that I meet in the world are people who recognize that they have a brain, a supercomputer, and a spinal cord. They have a nervous system interpreting sensation and their entire auditory experience, their visual experience, their mental experience, their beliefs, their personal stories. They're kind of aware that it's kind of encoded in this supercomputer that's plastic and that we can rewrite the code. And then there are people who don't, because we aren't taught about our own physiology. And I think that becomes it may be the most critical opportunity of our time, is that as we're sending out this generation of young people into a world that will inevitably alter our physiology in tangible, measurable ways. I'm very interested right now in a lot of the neuroscience about actual structural changes in the brain in this sort of evolving technical landscape that we're living in. And then our base level physiology, we're talking about a system designed through evolutionary biology to react in certain ways when it's hyper aroused. And we're watching a society that's more biased to being in positions that are of hyper arousal. I always use the example when I present to young people so that they can navigate this language around mental health. Because the way that we're talking about mental health, Ed, it seems like we're talking about it in a sort of backwards way where mental health means mental illness. Right now, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's May. Mental Health Awareness Month started in 1949. We've had a long time to get aware. And it kind of seems like proactive advocacy and education is the next step in that, right? Like a really critical thing. But when young people hear, when young people are talking about their nervous system, and it's not a proactive conversation about the mind and improving the health of the mind, and it's not something that feels exciting and engaging and positive. It feels like we're talking about disorders or illnesses, which are still kind of archaic terms. It begs the question, what should the human nervous system do in 2021? If I'm living on small screens, if I'm not sleeping well, if I happen to not be exercising, if my nutrition happens to be micronutrient deficient, or if I happen to be really stimulated on things like tons of caffeine and like Monster energy drinks, the way that the nervous system responds to stimulation is not a disorder, it's a survival mechanism. So the anecdote I usually give to young people to think about mental health and mental illness is I'll say, if during this 1 hour presentation, I were to start banging back shots of espresso, at some point you're going to see a change in my state. I'm 13 espresso shots in here. I haven't developed a mental health disorder. That's what the nervous system is. It's a responsive survival sort of essence of ourselves. And when we watch anxiety rates skyrocket in hyperstimulating environments, we need to ask, is that a disorder or a very appropriate physiological response to a new environment? And then B, we have to ask, what tangible tools can we give young people? And breath becomes that power tool that they can use anytime in real time to leverage their state.
So well said. So well said. Is there a specific exercise that you care to share with our audience that you've been using recently that you think might help some folks out there or some youngsters?
Yeah, I've got a short one for you, a real quick one.
Well, we got all the time in the world.
Well, I like to, again, what I like to do in the beginning, especially with young folks, is just kind of challenge them to say, like, why don't you close your mouth and leave it closed until you need to talk again? And then they recognize, I mean, I'm going to use me as the archetype here because I used to be a chain smoker and I used to live with habitual back pain and constant breathlessness. So I've lived the other side of that physiology. And when you don't know that another state of being where you actually feel pretty awesome is possible, you just don't have the archetype. A great mentor of mine shared an anecdote a while back, and I've applied it to everything because it's powerful for me. He was just making a joke, but it was a powerful insight. I was like, you know what nobody should do? They shouldn't write a book about foresight, because you would need foresight to know that you needed the book. And if you had foresight, you wouldn't need the damn thing. And I was like, oh, well, crap. That's everything. When I was chain smoking, living in constant breathlessness and back pain, I didn't think, oh, if only I could optimize my mental and physical health. And I didn't know that it was possible. There was not a lens. Interoception is something that you can sort of trampoline with certain tools, or you have to go through this process of sensation and perception and getting to be aware of your internal state. So when I think about what that felt like to live with, when you look at my actual skeletal archetype, right? I'm somebody who you're going to see probably biased to shifting their weight to the right and hanging out on the right leg, using their rib cage as kind of like a counter to set my arms on. Super sway back position. Now add chain smoking to that and like a pretty unhealthy lifestyle and constant feelings of breathlessness. I remember what that felt like. So the reason I always kind of go back to this, if we can just clean up the base level dysfunction, get people breathing through their nose, they're going to see 80% of the benefit. But then from an actual tangible exercise perspective, I've been playing around with this breath ladder I wake up in the mornings and I practice this little ladder of a 4-second inhale and a 6-second exhale, to a 6-second in, to an 8 out, to an 8 in, to a 10 out. I'll usually take that into like an 18 and 20. And it's just a little sort of a self-read. It's a way to get my ribs moving. It's a way to get me into a position that's going to alleviate some of the compression on my low back. I'll use positions that are comfortable for me. And it's kind of a little, it's just a fun little test, because on the days that I've slept poorly or that I feel like overall like allostatic, like life load is higher, sometimes I'll see an inability to hit those higher levels. It's a change in my CO2 tolerance, an increase in sensitivity. And I'd rather learn that through a breathing exercise than through a watch or ring. But we fortunately have watches and rings too that can help guide the interoceptive process, especially for young people, because they have to have some kind of archetype. They can't be 40 years old at 16. Right? They can't live 4 decades. They have a little bit of help in understanding. Like, we have a lot of young people at the gym who they love seeing their heart rate when they work out. They're constantly looking at it and checking it. I think there's almost a criticism that they shouldn't need that technology, but God, they're 15, 16 years old, being aware of their physiology.
Right.
Eventually they may not need it. They'll be able to basically say where their heart rate's at and take agency over it. It's so nice that there's a buffer to help them through that journey right now.
Well, first of all, David, I think that's an amazing technique in the morning. I think that's great to work that ladder where you're lengthening that exhale. I'm a big proponent of working on that exhale before noon to set in motion fat metabolism during the day, because fat's an endurance fuel, and we're all endurance athletes per se during the day. So yes, the sun is already up, the moon is down. You look at the exhale as cooling, and you start to lengthen that exhale in the morning. You bring up that parasympathetic response. You warm up that respiratory system first, the cardiovascular system second, and the neuromuscular systems third. I think you're well on the way of setting the table for peak mental performance during the day.
Really, really well said. And then, to Jose's point, he brought up sort of the vagal nerve stimulation, but just teaching kids a little bit about what the vagus nerve is and how things like exhale, emphasize breathing actually influence organs and organ function. It's probably taught in biology somewhere, but I don't meet adults who know it, so it wasn't learned. And it's through shows like yours and these opportunities, I think, that we create an opportunity to learn more about ourselves together. And that seems pretty important right now.
Well, the issue is it's not being taught in medical school the way it should be. That's the problem, is primary care physicians aren't teaching their patients about the resiliency and the importance of the vagus nerve. And that's another subject for another day.
Well, it'd be fun. We just recently working with a group of dentists, and I actually have to catch up with Jose on some of this stuff, just because when you start to look at some of the issues in the jawline that they're noticing from consistent chronic mouth breathing, now a group of dentists that we just worked with, we were doing some consulting with, they said the number one thing we tell new patients, the number one thing we help them with, is to get them to utilize nasal breathing for the majority of their day, so that they don't run into these constant TMJ issues and different issues of the jaw. So it seems like the work is working, the work that you've been pioneering for so long, it's having an impact. It's getting into more practices, professions, and that's really cool.
Dentistry industry is way out in front on this stuff, and kudos to them. I think they're doing an amazing job, because they're way open to this, and it makes all of us, it makes it easier, for all of us.
Absolutely.
When I'm working with clients, there's a few areas, nerves that I want them to be aware of. And number one is the early cranial nerves, the ones that pull down into the face. And the more that we can relax our face again and again and again, the cranial nerves help the brain organize the moment before we make a choice, and we can respond accordingly. Obviously, the 10th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve, which is just so important to adaptability, attention states, resiliency, fat metabolism, burning mucus, phlegm, and fat out of these gastrointestinal organs. And the last is the phrenic nerve, the motor nerve for the diaphragm. And just bringing simple awareness to those 3 platforms is going to give us a relaxed energy that's sustainable as we move through our day in rhythm, which will naturally give us, hopefully, a more rich delta wave night's sleep. Does that work for you, Dr. Herrero?
Yeah, I think that's very well put. And yeah, I think it would be very interesting to run a study in terms of like a breathing rate and breathing amplitude and different frequencies in different parts of the brain. I don't think there is one yet, but you would imagine that somebody that goes through this type of breath awareness, it would have very different neural excitability patterns. The thing is, one of the things that I have struggled since I joined the neurosurgery team is that doctors, want quick results, prescribe things, and sometimes they are a bit reluctant to breathing exercises. They say, oh, just take one of these inspiratory training machines, blow a bit, and that's it. That's gonna relax you a bit, but they don't really quite believe on the power of the breathing exercises. But like the more and more research we do, and the more practical applications we can find, I think it's gonna be so many evidences that it's gonna be impossible to negate. And this is what I've been trying to do, and I've seen a shift over the 6 years that I've been at the neurosurgery team. I've seen that they are very interested now in breathing, very interested in interoception, and this has extended to also the NIH, which National Institute of Health, which has launched a massive funding opportunity for research in interoception. And I think part of this is like the overwhelming evidence from people like us that keeps pushing.
Geez, well, at least you're going to have a lifetime of work. It's going to keep you busy all the way to the end of the line. So it's great to have you on board with this. And, as I age, as my boat drifts out to sea, so to speak, it's nice to know that the field that I love so much is in such good hands with two young men like yourself who have a sensitivity for the bigger picture of life. Love that human connection. You really want to help people understand themselves, their life, their value at such a rich level. So congratulations to you guys.
Well, Ed, thank you a million times over for having us on. This has been wonderful, and we're just absolutely inspired by your work and all that you've brought to helping people learn about this power tool that they have within them. So thank you.
Well, we're all in this together, and nobody gets left behind unless you want to be left behind, because we're moving forward. And I really want to connect later and do something just for endurance athletes. And
that would be a lot of fun. We work a lot. That was our initial inroad into this, and it's spiraled into different elements of our mental and physical state. But that would be a really fun conversation. Because
we're all endurance athletes, whether we're triathlon or we're running or we're at work for 12 hours, we want to create the same physiology and psychological states, because these are long, open programs of attention. And how can we continue to refine our attention as we work our way and make progressions deeper and deeper and deeper inside ourselves? So, I'm a big proponent of breath control, and I think it's the master key for any time we're going to be in extended states of attention where we're in a result-oriented platform.
Absolutely, Ed. I mean, when we built the Distance Project, initially it had a more simplistic meaning around endurance sports, but really quickly that meaning morphed into your point. We're endurance athletes in the sport of life, and we want to play the long game, and we want to feel awesome doing it.
And if life is a race, it's a race you want to come in last. And tools like this will really help you stall aging, remain young with a lot of vitality, but have that equanimity. When we need it, know when to zip it, when we need it, become a great listener, good hugger, all the things that sometimes might be missing as we challenge ourselves in this 2021. I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. I've learned so much in the last hour. You guys are really a great gift to the world, and I can't wait to connect with you again, and let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Go be great.